Hello and welcome to another episode with Chat with Ty. Today is episode 4 for Talking Sports. I have a special guest with me today, Nathan Dirks. He works in the digital production side of sports, and he has been working with Gopher Digital Production for the past couple of years. Nathan is from Minnesota/Wisconsin area, currently goes to school at the University of Minnesota. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us a fun fact, Nathan.
Yeah, to be more clear on where I'm from, I was born in Hastings, Minnesota, which is just south of Minneapolis. And then I moved when I was 6 to Somerset, Wisconsin, which is the same distance from Minneapolis, but just across the border, across from Stillwater. So I grew up mostly in Wisconsin. Grew up there the whole time and was still an avid Gopher and Minnesota sports fan. So I always followed everything Minnesota sports growing up, played soccer and track all through high school. So sports were always a big part of my life, and that's what got me into, working in sports, and we'll touch on that some more. But a fun fact about me, I'm a senior in college, but I have a dog, and I named him after Uncle Iroh from Avatar.
So you mentioned that you've played sports through high school, and that's kind of how you got interested in working in sports. So tell me a little bit more on why did you start working in the digital production side of sports?
Yeah, so it wasn't my plan, at least going into college. Going into freshman year, I was going to be a kinesiology major, going for PT. And I realized about right at the beginning of the second semester, when I started taking all the science classes for it, that it wasn't really for me. And I did not really want to go to 7 or 8 years of schooling for it. As much as I like the idea of being a physical therapist, I just realized it wasn't for me. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was just going to keep taking generals. But at the same time, I was looking for work. So I scoured the university job site and found one for Gopher Digital Productions, being a production assistant. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant, or I barely even read the job description. I just basically saw that it was running broadcasting for the Gopher Sports, and it looked really fun. So I decided to give it a try, and I ended up falling in love with it. And here we are 3.5 years later, and I'm planning on making a career out of it. So
absolutely. It's kind of interesting how people set their goal when they get into college, but then transition into something else because they find interest in a different topic or a different area of study. I
think anyone who I feel like at least 75% of people who come into college change their major. I'm not sure exactly, but I feel like it's got to be at least that amount, because it seems like everyone I know.
Yeah, absolutely. My roommate changed from, I don't even remember what major it was, but he switched major last year as well. For me personally, I wanted to do sports management, and that's I stuck with it for 4 years. But sometimes I do wonder if it is really the best idea for me to just be so narrow and not expand and see what else is out there. But I guess that's how life goes, that, you make decisions and you figure it out later.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
So you talked about you've been working for digital production, Gopher Digital Production for the past 3.5 years. Walk me through your game day prep, or how do you prepare for an upcoming production?
Yeah, it really depends on what I'm doing that day. So at this point, for GDP, Gopher Digital Productions, I am a student lead, and I'm one of the go-to students that our supervisors look to either help supervise an event or, just be helping on a day-to-day basis with any other students that might not know what's going on, anything like that. So there is quite a bit of prep work in the fact that a supervisor will reach out to me on a random day and ask me to help train someone or something like that. But as far as like game days go, it's not nearly as much as you'd think. There were times like last year I was the Gopher women's hockey event supervisor in venue. So what that meant is I came about 4 hours before game day, set up cameras, set up all the cabling and everything that goes there, make sure we're getting the feed to the control room over at the football stadium, and then also preparing everything that needs to go on the video board. So like days like that where I was event supervising, like that's a lot of prep work. It usually take me about 2 hours of that 4 hours before game time to get all that done. But then there's days where, I might just be running graphics. So it's show up an hour and a half before game time, sit on my phone for an hour. And then once we actually have to start playing graphics, I'll start playing them. So it really depends. And I mean, like so I also work for Minnesota United. And we just got done with the All-Star Week for MLS. It was in Minneapolis here at Allianz. And for that, I was the main show control op, as well as I was loading all of our Daktronics content, which is just a lot. That's a software, Daktronics, that a lot of people in live event production use to get content on the video boards. So there's different ones out there, but Daktronics is one of the better ones and one of the more simpler ones to use. So I loaded a majority of that content over the week, and that took like 50 hours before the event even started. So it all really depends on what I'm doing, but there is a lot of prep work that goes into this. And I mean, that's almost every department in sports, but I think event production, it's just with everything that goes into it, there's so many different spots where an event can fail, at least on the event production side. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into it.
Yeah, that's how sports works in general, I guess. You, as a fan, you go to those games, events, and you just kind of experience everything. And you never really understood how much time, how much prep it took for them to set everything up, to run everything through, and how much knowledge each person have to have for the event so the event can be run so smoothly. You kind of mentioned one of the difficult parts of your job being the build up, how much you have to prepare for it. But is there any other parts of your job that you think is especially difficult to pick up? Or is there any parts of your job that you really, really enjoy doing?
Well, I guess I can answer both those questions with one thing. I think it's problem solving. A big portion of, if you want to make live event production your full-time career, broadcasting, there's going to be tons and tons of issues thrown at you on a daily basis. And like things that will work one day will just stop working the next. And you got to be prepared for that. And you have to have the mental ability, I guess. You have to be able to problem solve that to a very good point where you can figure out what's wrong with all these different pieces of equipment that go in a control room, go in a venue. And you'd be able to figure out where the issue is and be able to fix that. And that's the hardest part of this whole career, but it's also the most rewarding and my favorite part, because when you figure something out for yourself, there's no major, or there's no set career path into being a broadcast engineer or just working in broadcasting in general. So there's no way that you get taught how to do this. It's all a lot based on what you know and what you can teach yourself. So it's the hardest, but also the best part to me is the problem solving, and it's going to be a lot more of it. And I've talked to you, we're upgrading our control room over at University of Minnesota, and the amount of issues, and I barely have seen it because I'm not working on it day to day like our broadcast engineer is, but she is just the amount of problems that they've seen in like a 2-month basis to get it ready for football, which is September 1st. And yeah, it's just like the amount of things that can go wrong, and you have to be able to get through that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things when I speak to someone working in the sport industry is they stress the fact that it is a constantly changing environment, and you got to be on the top of your game and be able to think on your own and change according to the circumstances. Obviously, that comes with a lot of experience and the knowledge. More experience you have, more knowledge you have on the topic, the easier it is for you to figure out a solution. But all sports, no matter what department you're in, it's always an organized chaos. You mentioned that there's no set path for a career in broadcasting, because I don't believe that the U has a major for broadcasting. So what is your career goal for working in broadcast, and how do you plan to achieve that goal?
Yeah, I mean, so there are not at the U. The U doesn't have any sort of program that's very beneficial. Like, they have a few like movie making classes and stuff like that, but it's not really helpful to broadcasting because it's a completely different world, even though it's both making content for TV and yeah. But there are some schools that have majors that are kind of applicable. Like, I know St. Cloud, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but they have like a major that would definitely help. They focus a lot on live TV, but it's more like news. It's not really like sports broadcasting. So it's a completely different world. And as far as my career aspirations, I want to become a broadcast engineer or a broadcast manager. They're kind of becoming interchangeable at this point. It used to be you had like a broadcast engineer, and then you had people who would crew out games. And now that job is kind of becoming the same, as becoming a broadcast engineer doesn't need to be as technical. You can kind of get by learning a lot of stuff on your own now. And there's just so many different, like all the software companies like Daktronics, Ross, all of them have such good teaching content out there that anyone could really do it. So what you're seeing a lot now with like pro organizations is like a broadcast manager, where they are in charge of everything in the control room, everything in all the cameras, all the JVT boxes, everything that you would need for broadcast. But they're also crewing out the people who are running that stuff. So they're, finding a graphics person, they're finding someone to run expression, they're finding someone to run show control, they're finding camera operators, they're finding a director, and they're managing them as well as keeping up with all the systems that their venue has. So that's my career aspirations. I want to get there within like 5 to 10 years. That's I think a pretty good goal. But for right out of college, I just want to become like a production assistant for a team, or a number 2 for a broadcast manager or engineer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It is kind of different in a lot of ways, but also very similar. Managerial responsibilities that you mentioned is also very common in other areas of different industries. You have to manage, it's kind of like an HR, but also technical director kind of mixed into one, because you have to have the knowledge to understand how the show is going to be run. And you also have to have the ability to crew the right people. So definitely something very interesting to learn more about. I know for me personally, one of the most intriguing thing about working in sports is the ability for constant growth, and the ability for me to reach horizontally and learn different positions and learn to do different things in sports, especially in broadcasting. I started with operating camera solely, and then I reached out to our manager, Callie, and I was able to have experience in the control room doing show control, doing graphics, replay, all that kind of stuff. What do you think, from your perspective, is the best part of the job, and what's the worst part of the job?
So I mean, the best part of the job, I think, is just like sitting back and seeing all of your work come together. That was a big thing with the All-Star Week that we just had for MLS. Like, I had never completely built the show out like that before. That was by far the most technical work that I've ever had to do. And, you know, you saw a lot of errors, like throughout the 3 days that they were building. I think I had to make about 300 buttons, and I think I had to redo about 100 and at least half of those. So it's like a lot of work, and it's like, it stresses you out because you need it to look good by the time, and you have a very set deadline, like this is when the event is happening. But then you get to that actual game day, and to just see all of your work completely come to fruition like that, and for it all to run well. I think at least for the first day of the MLS All-Star Week was 2 days. The first was the skills, and that's where I had a lot to build because we had a bunch of different graphics and stuff that we were putting up that I would be playing. That, like, just seeing all of that come to work and work well is super rewarding, and definitely like my favorite part of the job. And it kind of goes with that, the problem solving. Like, it's rewarding because, you're the one who's figuring it out, and, you're the only one around you with that capacity that just, it makes you feel good, I guess, and makes me enjoy my work. The hardest part, I mean, like, it's hard. It's a hard industry to get into. So I guess it's not even like that I don't like it. Like, I really like the job, but there's not very much opportunity with it. Like, you really have to be on your stuff, and you have to know your stuff to make it. So that's kind of stressful as someone who's leaving college with that being their plan, and, I hope I can do well, but you never really know. You sink or float, sink or swim. So I don't know if that's like my least favorite part of the job, because I mean, it does like make you also work harder. I guess another con I would say is like the late hours working in sport. I feel like people working in sport, that's why they typically leave. It's because like they want to work more of a 9 to 5. When you're working in sport, that's just not an option, especially when you're like fully in the season. But what's nice about that too is like when you have an off season, at least if you work for a team full time, I've seen, it seems like all those jobs just kind of go remote for like 5-6 months. It's like, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So, I mean, you take what you can. You have to work late nights, but you get 5 months off, basically. You get a summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I really relate with the long hours and the late nights, because I also try to make it in an industry, and I worked 4 different jobs at one time last year, and usually it's sporting events. It's late at night on a weekend, and sometimes I wake up at like 7 a.m., 6:30 a.m., go through my routine, go to school, do my classes, do my homework, and then 5 o'clock at night, I rush to one of the stadiums, and I'm working for the rest of the night until I get home at like 11 o'clock at night. And then it's the same thing over and over again for a couple of days, and it really drains you out. Sometimes it's just really important for you to, at least for me, to keep in sight what I want to achieve, and that kind of drives me to keep going forward. And I find it really interesting that you mentioned the off-season things. I guess for me, because I work I've been doing so much part-time job for different teams. So I never personally experienced an off season, but definitely definitely a pro when it comes to working full-time for just one team, because you do have that extended break. It's kind of like a summer break for us in college.
Yeah. No, and I'm actually going to change my con to like figuring out your schedule when you work for because I'm in the same boat. Like I work Gophers, I work Minnesota United, and then I work Timberwolves and Lynx, and like working 3 different places with all different. Then they send you a schedule that's like, okay, first half of the season, let us know when you're free 4 months from now. And it's like all these 3 different places are trying to know what you're doing 4 months from now. And it's like, I don't want to tell you that.
Exactly. But I guess another part of me that kind of regretted a little bit that I didn't really try different majors in college was because of the uncertainty that comes with the job. A lot of the positions are seasonal. A lot of them, even more, are part-time based. So I always imagine if I have done something more technical or hard skill based, for example, statistics. I had a stat minor before I transferred to the U. I thought maybe something more concrete would set more of a foreseeable path for me. The uncertainty is definitely one of the most common fears of working in this industry.
Yeah, so definitely.
But that's why, like you were saying, that's why we keep pushing ourselves to keep reaching for higher level, to push ourselves to get more experience and learn. So I guess that's a kind of a double-edged sword, because it keeps us moving, but also makes us grow stronger, I guess.
Yeah.
So last question for you is, if you were to talk to someone who's also interested in learning more about the industry and potentially pursuing a career in this industry, digital production side of sports in this case, what's some of the advices and suggestions that you would give to this person?
I'd say, ask for help. I think no one going into that, like anyone like just working as like a camera op, and like when you start out with like GDP and stuff, you just start as like camera ops and maybe running graphics or something, and it kind of like it feels kind of almost overwhelming, to the fact like you don't know the whole scope of what an event like that takes. So just like, if you're interested in it, ask for help, ask your supervisors or whatever to learn more. That's one of the biggest things that got me to where I am, where I feel comfortable coming out of college, is just like asking my supervisors, what does this thing do? How can you help me learn? And at least if you're in our department, like our supervisors are always willing to let you learn. And I mean, like, even like my bosses, the broadcast managers at Minnesota United and Timberwolves, both of them have let me shadow at their positions for on multiple occasions, and literally just come in and I get to just see them work on a day that nothing's even going on, like they're just setting up for a game a week from that day. So just ask for help, ask to learn.
Definitely, that's something that I've learned through my life pretty much. If you don't ask, everyone's gonna assume that you don't want something or you're fine as it. That's one of the most important things that I learned from all of my internships that I've done. A lot of times as an intern, people don't give you the important jobs, or they give you like the most repetitive and boring in some way tasks, until you kind of prove yourself and you ask for more. Same goes with my internship with the digital production unit. I started off, like you mentioned, I started off as a camera op. I really, really enjoyed doing it. However, I was always really curious about different aspects of the production side of things. And I reached out to Callie, our supervisor, and I asked her if I could shadow other people and then eventually take over some of the tasks. And she was really open to it. And that's how I got to experience the different parts of production. Obviously, you never know until you ask. That's kind of how I got more out of my experience. What I'm trying to say here is if you want to be successful in any industry, you got to have the mindset to ask for what you want. And also you have to be able to push yourself to reach a higher level by asking for more responsibilities. So yeah, thank you, Nathan, for hopping on today and chat with me a little bit more about the digital production side of sports. And I hope you guys enjoy listening. This is Chat with Ty. I will see you guys next time.
Thank you.